Out of all the things to come out of Final Fantasy VII Remake, which in itself is a brand new continuity away from the original, there's been nothing more divisive than the switch from the traditional ATB system used in the original game to a brand new action RPG hybrid system. It has been a point of hot contention for years since the first announcement, being born dualistically from many people being unwilling to accept anything outside of the original battle system, and general sentiments that Final Fantasy XV, the first mainline game to have action battles, was generally considered lackluster, and is oftentimes labeled completely mindless by its detractors. However, when Square Enix took the stage at their E3 2019 press conference, many others, including myself, were blown away by this brand new battle system. They seemed to finally figure out a way to mold the best of both worlds. In fact, even reading comments online, many people that claimed that they had no interest in the game due to its move away from the turn-based command style system found themselves interested in the game again. Not only that, but several gaming journalists who got their hands on the game have more or less stated that they were blown away by how enjoyable it was, and that many of their reservations about the game's combat has been dissolved. So what is it that Final Fantasy VII Remake is doing that's so special? I personally believe the magic lies in the game's sheer amount of options to approach playing it. Final Fantasy VII Remake's combat system hybrids action combat and turn-based combat in a way in which the series has never seen before. You're allowed to run around the battlefield freely, dodge attacks and block them, or go offensive with your basic or heavier attack. This is standard fare stuff for an action RPG, though what initially worried me and many others is that you would lose access to so many options. Honestly, the best thing about Final Fantasy VII's gameplay originally was that you always had so many options available. To the contrast with Final Fantasy XV, which never attempts to miss a beat in the action, limits your ability to use magic. Because there's no real magic system outside of being able to make a weird magic grenade, players often felt like the game lacked any depth or ability to strategize. I mean, this game is a Final Fantasy and there's no cure magic. Furthermore, items could be abused to absolutely no end. If you had enough healing items, you were effectively immortal. The end result was a game that players felt very limited in their options, and the options that they did have seemed to be inconsequential in relation to the game's overall exploitability. Here's where Final Fantasy VII Remake appears to differ so greatly. What makes this game system come all together is the return of the original game's ATB meter. Your ATB is continuously charging in the bottom right corner, although you could hasten it by consecutively landing attacks. Once it's filled, you can enter what's called tactical mode, which slows the game down into bullet time and allows the player to choose commands from the command menu, having all the options they normally have access to in the original Final Fantasy VII. Furthermore, doing any of these commands such as your items or magic costs a full ATB charge, so there's absolutely no spamming here. Whereas in Final Fantasy XV, items could be used with relatively no cooldown in between. In Final Fantasy VII Remake, you'll be put in situations where you have to make a choice on whether you want to use magic or say items. That is to say, exactly like the original Final Fantasy VII. And while you can switch to characters directly and control them, you can also give them commands directly without ever having to switch characters. By pressing L2 or R2, where each trigger represents one of your party members, you can pull up their unique command menu. So for example, if I wanted Aerith to use Karaga on Tifa, and say Aerith was mapped to L2, we would tap L2, enter tactical mode, and time would come to a near halt. From there, you would simply select the commands from the menu, and again, it would be just like the original FF7. But of course, you can also map these commands to shortcuts and never interrupt the action. If you can see what I'm getting at here, while your basic moment-to-moment offensive and defensive options are going to be quite different, all your high-level options will function extremely similar to the way that they always have, meaning that nested between all the AAA action and explosions, you have a system that strongly shows resemblance to the original game. But those still very much opposed to any sort of real-time battle system have used the words hack and slash as a way of suggesting that action RPGs are mindless button mashers. First of all, this is a completely false statement, and easily observable if you've ever played a good action RPG, especially at a higher difficulty than normal, which forces you to fully comprehend the game's mechanics at a higher level. That's when it really becomes apparent. One of my favorite action RPGs of all time being Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix. When you play this brilliantly done action RPG on normal mode, mode, as the game was meant to be beaten by a broad audience, including younger kids, you'd have never learned the massive amounts of depth to this game's combat system. Because of that, you might go on someone's comment section and be like, the game is a button masher, press triangle to win, or that summons do nothing, especially when summons are actually one of the most useful tools in the game, if you properly understand how to use them, which many people didn't. Though playing through this game on its most difficult setting, critical mode, it's often said to be the most enjoyable action RPG battle systems ever made, as the player always has a large amount of viable options. Even now, I still see different ways people approach boss battles I would have never even thought to do, simply due to the large number of viable strategies that there are available. Admittedly, action RPGs do tend to give you less options, especially from something you would expect like FF7. This is normally because they require quick button presses, but because Final Fantasy VII Remake doesn't require this type of dexterity from you, you aren't going to die in an attempt to scroll down to a potion. Action RPGs, particularly at their higher levels of play, do require immense levels of strategy, just as a turn-based game does, though it is a different type of strategy overall. And what's so brilliant about the system of this game is that it merges both the quick calculation mindset required of a good action RPG and the well thought out tactics of a turn-based game, which ultimately might make it more immersive than either in their purest states. I understand for purists this still may not be enough, and really anything outside of the source material of the original PS1 classic is simply not going to stack up to them. But for anyone on the fence about the game's combat, consider that most of your options are performed in a highly similar fashion. The big difference in the game's battle system is that your moment-to-moment action, that is, basic attacks and defense, are what's the big change. During most of the normal fights in FF7, you typically find yourself doing some regular attacks to enemies. Occasionally, you may do something like heal yourself or use magic or a summon, but if you were interested in conserving MP, you would just hit that attack button. But with this new battle system, each encounter represents itself quite differently. Sure, you'll have battles where you just attack and do nothing else, and those will go by quicker and more seamlessly than ever. With a battle system like this, you could have the exact same number and same type of enemies, but simply due to the positioning in the environment, the battle could play out entirely different. This means even regular encounters can be mixed up in a way that they hadn't before. But look, I'm not saying at all that this new combat system featured in Final Fantasy VII Remake is without question going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. This is Square Enix, and it can always turn out to be fairly lackluster. In fact, until we get our hands on the game, and I spent a tremendous number of hours truly getting a feel for it in its depth, it's hard to say definitively, but it does offer a lot of potential, and I'm really open-minded to it, and all the people playing it seem to absolutely love it. I love the original game's combat, and it'll always hold a special place in my heart, but given that this battle system has shown a great potential, more so than any previous battle system in a long time, I'm going to give it a chance, and honestly, I'm really excited. So Ultima Weapons, are you looking forward to Final Fantasy VII Remake's combat system? Do you respectfully disagree with my thesis here, which is always fine? It's all about having a great discussion about ideas here. Subscribe, click the bell icon, and let me know in the comments below. And if you've been enjoying my content, be sure to check out the Patreon for the Night Sky Prince, like Ichoras13, who's helping me pump more and more videos out leading up to the release of Final Fantasy VII Remake, and long after that. I love and appreciate you guys so much. Shout out to Ichoras13 and the rest of the Ultima community.